Hello, everyone. We're just getting our technology set up, just giving folks a few minutes to join us. If this is the first time that you are joining us for a live call, I usually pop in twice a month to answer questions that have popped up inside of my online community for my online students. And I try to address as many questions as I can in the time that we have together. I will take moments of rest and pause to address questions and thoughts and reflections coming up in the chat. So certainly as I go through, please feel free to type your questions, comments, inquiries in the chat so that I can try to address them for those of you that are here on the call. And so with that, I'm just going to give you a little overview of some of the questions I received in advance. I suspect this may take the time that we have together, but let's see how it goes. The first couple questions we're going to be addressing here today. The first question is kind of lengthy. I'm just going to summarize it into one sentence. I had a rupture in my relationship with an avoidant partner, and I want to know how to mend it without compromising myself. The second question, how do I express my feelings while respecting boundaries and avoid people pleasing? How does or why does my avoidant partner want to see me almost daily, but then they act disengaged, distracted, or unaffectionate when I'm there, leaving me feeling unwanted despite his claims that he desires me? And can you help me practice recognizing and staying connected to my needs? I lose touch with this, especially if I am in an anxious state. So let me know there in the chat, do any of these questions sound familiar to you? And also, if you have any questions popping up, please type them there so that I can be sure to address them when we have the opportunity. Okay. Yes to all of them. Thank you. Great. So let's start with, I had a rupture in my relationship with an avoidant partner, and I want to know how to mend it without compromising myself. It's a great question. There is a little background in here. My dismissive avoidant boyfriend returned after a 6-week break, but left for a trip a week after that. The break was triggered by him projecting his work and life frustrations onto me, which stemmed from a lack of boundaries. Before his crisis, he leaned slightly codependent, but now seems to be more avoidant due to past enmeshment. When he came back, he was affectionate and expressed that he missed me. Despite this, the break caused a major breach of trust for me, and I felt disappointed and hurt. He often handles conflict by withdrawing, hanging up, running away, or taking breaks. When I brought up this tendency to project his issues onto me, he still blamed me as the trigger, and instead of taking responsibility for his feelings and reactions. So there's really several questions here. How can I get him to understand the importance of taking responsibility for his thoughts and feelings instead of blaming me? How can we establish better boundaries in communication? After this breach of trust, how do I navigate this relationship in a way that avoids repeating the same cycle? How can I manage my disappointment and frustration around feeling like I have to revolve around or appease him? Okay, so there's actually quite a few questions here. I'm going to try to address this as well as I can. So there's basically 4 topics here: communication, setting boundaries, how to move forward and break a cycle, right? And how do I manage my own feelings, needs, and boundaries in the situation? So for our inquirer, it's clear that they're feeling hurt and frustrated, and our feelings are always valid, right? So we start there by understanding that our feelings are valid no matter what the other person says, and that we are trying to make space for everyone to have their feelings, whatever they might be, right? So to address the first question, how can I get them to understand the importance of taking responsibility instead of blaming me? So this is less about trying to become a teacher to someone, because that's always going to be off-putting. And it's more about do not hide the consequences and the emotional impact of their behavior on you, right? By walking on eggshells around them, pleasing or appeasing them, right? Don't do that, because that's how you show them that it's important to take responsibility for your reactions to things. But we do verbalize this in such a way that the other person can hear it, right? We take into consideration their communication style, their attachment style, and that's usually going to allow things to land better, right? So you might say something like, these words feel like criticism or blame, and that hurts me deeply. I do want to contribute to your happiness, but this feels like I'm being made responsible for all of your emotions, and that's unsafe for me. Can we talk about how we can handle these moments together and make space for each other's feelings, right? Another way of saying this might be, this is important and I want to hash it out. Can we figure out a way to express ourselves without attacking each other? Is there a way for us to be allies instead of enemies with this? I want to be here for you, and it's tough for me too. Instead of running away, taking breaks, or leaving, you could say, I need a silent pause. I'm not going to leave the room, but I'm a little overloaded and I just need to slow down before I can help you with this, right? Now, if this is someone who continues to deflect, even though you're trying to create opportunities in this way, then it's a sign they may not be willing to confront their own patterns, at least not in the moment. So you can decide how much time you're willing to give them to go away and come back. And if they still are not able to address it head on, then that's when you really need to seek counseling or some kind of therapeutic support where you have a buffer in the room that creates that sort of objective observations, right? Creates this sort of objective perspective in the room. Now, how do we establish better boundaries? Well, boundaries really need to be clear, consistent, and they need to be upheld in action. So you let them know what your expectations are for communication. So for example, when conflict happens, I really need us to talk it through rather than walking away. Is there a way that we can agree on this as baseline, right? So maybe it's taking a 10 to 15 minute silent pause, but you're still in the same room together, right? You also want to decide what you are and are not willing to tolerate. So if this pattern of withdrawing and blaming is an ongoing cycle, then you yourself may need to take a step back and figure out, what do you need to do to protect your own emotional well-being? And then evaluate if you really want to continue with a relationship with someone who is unwilling to even acknowledge or address the impact of their behavior on you, right? Now, how do we move forward? So after there is a breach of trust, there's really no way to navigate the relationship unless you address that breach of trust, because it's going to become like a knot in a tree. You may still interact with each other. You may pretend like it didn't happen. You may just keep moving on, but the knot is still there, and it's going to continue to accumulate psychic and emotional material. Okay. And so trust can really only be rebuilt if both parties are interested in working towards it, and that original breach of trust is addressed directly. So you want to be honest about how that breach of trust really affected you. So, and you also want to state your intention. So you might say, I want to rebuild trust, but I need to feel seen and heard and supported when I express my feelings instead of blamed. So I feel seen, heard, and supported when you do XYZ. I feel more blamed when you do ABC, right? And so at that point, you're really extending an invitation for them to demonstrate their willingness and show up with consistency in their thoughts, words, and actions, right? Now, let's say they don't. Let's say they don't accept that. Well, now the task is to manage your disappointment and frustration and make sure that you're keeping that in check so that you don't wind up slipping back into people pleasing or trying to appease them, right? Because if you do, now you're operating from a place of attachment anxiety instead of consciously holding your values and priorities in relationship in highest priority and esteem, right? In other words, you're not advocating for yourself anymore and the relationship has become toxic to you. So you want to reflect on what you can control, and that is your reactions, your boundaries, and your choices. If you find yourself revolving around them or trying to appease them, you really want to pause and ask yourself, is this behavior in service of my greatest good and in service of my needs, or am I just trying to avoid a conflict? And so breaking a cycle is really about prioritizing your health and well-being and not ignoring the impact of someone else's behavior on your well-being. So, it is really natural to feel somewhat disillusioned or disappointed when someone falls short of your expectations of the relationship. And so you want to give yourself some time and space to kind of process those emotions. Obviously, doing these things in therapy can be supremely helpful, or even participating in one of my courses. In this case, I'd probably recommend the Courageous Communicator course because it's going to touch upon the questions you have around communication, but it's also going to introduce art therapy directives and somatic guided visualizations to help you not only say the right things at the right time, but process the emotional energy behind your words, right? Because communication is more than just the words we speak. It's the energy that we are expressing behind them. And that is not necessarily a verbal or intellectual thing. This is something that needs to be addressed on the body level and on the emotional level. Okay. And that is why my courses have experiential and visceral types of activities to do, so that you're not just thinking differently, you're also feeling differently. And that means you're showing up to your relationships with a different kind of vibe, let's say, right? So if you're interested in learning more about that, I recommend we'll put a link to the introductory training for the Courageous Communicator in the replay of this video. Okay, so I hope that helps answer that question. I'm just going to take a pause here. My fearful avoidant came on strong. We have a history from 30 years ago. And then when I was hooked in, I go, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not ready for a relationship. I'm assuming he said that. We've been long distance for 6 months. Right when I moved closer, he ended it. After 6 weeks, no contact, I reached out and responded immediately. We texted. I'm wondering if I should go back to the East Coast and take care of myself and trust when he's ready, he'll come back. So remember, attachment, these types of relationships, especially if they start long distance, you really have to keep in mind, how is the long distance informing your relationship, especially if it starts out long distance? Because for you to agree to engage in an emotionally intimate level with someone that is long distance from the get-go, there's something in that proximity that is safe for you, and there is something in that proximity that is safe for them. And so, of course, intimacies can evolve across distances. Passion can evolve in a sort of what they used to call courtly manner, right? The sort of chivalrous kind of courtly type of courtship that's going on. However, at some point, typically what happens is one person feels like their desire grows, and well, this proximity was safe in the beginning, but now I want to get closer to feel safer because I want this relationship to deepen, to evolve, to change. And usually what happens is the other person is not there yet and may never be. And maybe part of why they were willing to allow themselves to be so emotionally connected in the beginning is because you were so far away. And the expectations, desires, needs, negotiations of shared emotional spaces and responsibilities, none of that really exists, because when you are far apart from one another, there's a lot of space to fill up with fantasy, assumptions, and infatuated feelings. And so then when you move closer now, what's happened is, if this was the safe proximity to begin with, you've moved closer, well, now you've changed the parameters. And so this person has a choice to either try to grow and evolve with you and shrink their safe proximity, or they will start to back up to retain the safety that was there in the first place. Some people are just really good at the honeymoon phase. Some people are really good at courtly love. They're not so good at mature and sophisticated love. Love that evolves, love that deepens, love that grows over time, love that requires addressing and embracing each other's flaws, love that requires getting sick and taking care of your partner, love that takes you through illness, love that takes you through death and grief, love that takes you through boring routines of life, picking up kids, dropping them off, grocery shopping, laundry, right? These are all completely different facets of relationship. And so sometimes people, when they start from a long distance space, they get to enjoy the sort of fruits of that emotional connection because it lives in a sort of intangible space. But when we if you move closer, and they start pulling away, distancing, just, distracting themselves, you've changed the parameters and they're not ready for it. If you back up now, or you withdraw in some way and they start reaching out again, it's because you've reestablished the original proximity that felt safe, right? And this is sort of like, I'd have you think of this as like a radio dial. So, or like an equalizer is probably a better way of saying it. Okay, so the physical distance is over here, so that feels comfortable. You shrink the physical distance, maybe it's a little bit heavier now. Well, now the emotional withdrawal has to go up, right? Because if I'm physically close and I'm emotionally close, that's too overwhelming. But if I'm physically close and I'm a little emotionally distant, that's safer. Whereas when you're far away, well, now I can be more emotionally close because you're far away, right? So that's one way I would have you think about it. Should I go back or should I try and stay and see if it can be worked out? At this point, I would make decisions based on what's good for you. And then I would, you know, try not to avoid having direct conversations about what's really going on and to say, I've noticed this happened, and then I noticed that happened, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. And then give it time and then decide how much time you're willing to give it and then stick to that. Because if you start to see a pattern occurring and then you call them out on the pattern and they're not willing to acknowledge it or address it in any way, then they're giving you good information. Then that's really what you need to know if it's worth hanging around for that, right? And then whatever the gifts were of that relationship can become the gifts of that relationship, and then you can bring them into whatever the next opportunity might be. Right. I hope that's helpful. Great. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So let's see. I want to make sure I address the other ones also that were submitted. How do I express my feelings while respecting boundaries and avoid people pleasing? So it's kind of similar to our first question, but let's address this in a slightly different way. How do I express my feelings while respecting boundaries and avoiding people pleasing? So there's a little more detail here. I've often found that one's anxious attachments can manifest into people-pleasing tendencies, like repressing your own emotions for the sake of the relationship or overextending yourself. Do you have any tips that would suggest a better way to communicate with kindness and compassion how you feel while also honoring your boundaries? Great question. So boundaries tend to be an indication of the needs that exist underneath them, right? And our needs always inform our values and our priorities, our preferences, the things that feel good and don't feel good in a relationship. But sometimes we can harbor negative beliefs that boundaries are mean or they're selfish, which kind of keep us in a confused and insecure state when we have to negotiate boundaries in a relationship. And that's usually because there were either simple or complex shame blocks that were assigned to whatever you were expressing in terms of your needs. So we start by kind of deconstructing these underlying beliefs, because unless we address them on that level, the shame will just find new shapes and forms to express itself. Even if we learn all the right things to say, we're still going to be holding that in our bodies. And maybe it sounds like we're saying the right thing, but we're consumed with fear because the words don't match up with what we're terrified the consequence is going to be. So for example, there's typically, I think, 6 dimensions in which these limiting beliefs about our boundaries usually express themselves. The first, I would say, is toxic positivity. The second is anti-dependency. The third is abandonment fears. Fourth would be emotional enmeshment. 5, issues of self-sacrifice. And 6, we wind up with confused power dynamics. So I talk a lot more about these in depth. I have one more video to go. We're releasing a 4-part video series on shame and how shame gets tied into our attachment styles and using art therapy approaches to heal these sort of shame wounds that we have. And I'll leave a link to that in the caption of this video. But for now and for this segment, I'm going to just offer some examples of what it might look like, of what these dimensions might look like in the way that we think and believe about things. So the first one, if we're taking a look at toxic positivity. So when we are clinging to toxic positivity, it can affect our boundaries by confusing them. So for example, that might sound like Well, feelings are only acceptable if they are pleasing or positive, right? But if we were to clear that up and we were to reframe that idea, in other words, release the shame around them, we might say, well, all feelings are my friends, and that's the most positive position I could assume. And my feelings keep me well informed about my inner and outer worlds, right? If we were to look at this through the lens of anti-dependency, when it is confused, typically with a simple or a complex shame bind, it might sound like, well, to meet my own needs, it must mean that I have to either be alone or have to figure out how to love myself in isolation, right? This kind of anti-dependency. If we were to clear that up, it might sound like, well, meeting my own needs includes establishing safe and loving connections with others who are supportive and willing to help me, right? If we were to look at this through the themes of abandonment, fears of abandonment, the confused expression of that might be, if I want something for myself, I'm abandoning my partner and excluding them from my life, right? If we were to clear that up with the correct sort of boundary establishment, we would say, saying yes to myself is not saying no to you. In fact, it invites you to know the real me. And if we were to look at this through the lens of emotional enmeshment, the more confused way or confused beliefs around this might sound like, well, I don't have a right to my needs if somebody else is struggling with them. And so if we were to clear that up, we might say, my needs are valid no matter what, and someone else's struggle does not negate them. In fact, it creates opportunities for us to grow and get to know each other better. If we were to look at this through the lens of issues of self-sacrifice, right? The confused beliefs around these boundaries might sound like, well, love requires a measure of suffering and self-sacrifice, otherwise it can't really be true love. And if we were to clear that up, it might sound like, well, if it feels like a sacrifice, it just means the boundary is being stimulated, and we want to make sure that every compromise we're making really aligns with our values and priorities. Right? And lastly, this confusion around power dynamics. So the limiting belief might sound like it has to be their needs or mine. Someone is always giving or taking more than the other. And if we were to clear that up, it might sound like, well, conflicting needs can coexist and even contribute to one another with curiosity, acceptance, and compassionate communication. Right? So asserting our boundaries really requires being mindful of the impact of our behaviors on someone else, right? And if we're trying to communicate them, that also means being mindful, in my opinion, of someone else's attachment style and how they give and receive information. So for example, with avoidant partners, they're typically more amenable to what are called soft strategies in communication. So soft strategies are communications that express appreciation, respect a person's individual autonomy, and also creates opportunities for them to make choices. So instead of saying something like, we never go out anymore, right? Which is basically you saying that you have a need for variety, you have a need for stimulation, you have a need for connection in a different and unique and stimulating way, right? We might say that in a different way. So we might say, wow, spending time together really lights me up, and I enjoy it when we do XYZ. It's actually really important to me to have that in a relationship, and I'd love to do more of that in the future. What activities do you like sharing the most? I'm really interested in your ideas, right? Then we have safe communication strategies. And these are strategies that tend to work better with anxious open hearts because they offer reassurance and validation. Okay. And both of these things serve to provide a sense of safety and connection through our communication. So, for example, let's say someone feels, or someone who's an anxious open heart likes to text a lot throughout the day. Instead of someone saying, or the partner saying, you know, you text too much, you might say, wow, I really love connecting with you, and that you want to be this communicative with me throughout the day. I really want to give you my full attention, but it's difficult at work. Can we schedule a time to check in after work hours at like 6:30 p.m.? So this is useful because number one, it affirms the connection. I really love connecting with you, and I so appreciate you are reaching out to me throughout the day. You are also affirming that you care about them. I really love connecting with you and I want to give it my full attention. And then you set a specific date and time to connect. So it makes it unambiguous, right? Can we connect after this time? And because it's for work hours or what have you. And so that makes it very clear that it's not about something that you're rejecting in them. It's just because you're distracted at work and you want to give them your full attention. So this is what we would call a safe strategy. Now, what about disorganized partners, or what are sometimes called fearful avoidant partners, who are predictably unpredictable and can feel more avoidant one minute and anxious the next? You would want to feel into, in the moment, are they pulling away or are they pushing harder? If you feel like they're pulling away, then you use the soft strategies. If you feel like they're pushing harder, then you use the safe strategies. Okay. If you want help learning more about that, you need some assistance communicating boundaries and needs using things like safe or soft strategies. Again, I'd recommend watching the introductory training for my Courageous Communication course if you're not already signed up for that. So that's a training. We go over my 3-step HIP communication formula, and it digs really deeply into how to identify your needs and communicate them using a compassionate vocabulary, incorporating these different strategies, and also doing it in such a way that you feel like you're not people pleasing or abandoning yourself in the process, right? So if you want to learn more about that, again, we'll leave a link to that in the caption of the replay. So I hope that helps. I'd love to see in the chat if this is resonating with you, or if this is making sense. Okay. Why does my avoidant partner want to see me almost daily, but then act disengaged, distracted, and unaffectionate when I am there, leaving me feeling unwanted despite his claims that he desires me? Okay. So it sounds like your partner might be seeking comfort or reassurance from your presence, but may struggle with maintaining emotional intimacy or connection while you're there because of their avoidant tendencies. So, our avoidant partners can crave connection just like anybody else, but they can feel overwhelmed or vulnerable when it actually becomes available. And so they may do things to kind of distance or distract themselves to tolerate the closeness. Um, the other thing that might be important to keep in mind is that sometimes partners who demonstrate avoidant tendencies tend to prefer parallel play. So that means that you're together in the same space, but you're doing different activities next to each other, like in parallel, right? Um, and parallel play is something that is developmentally healthy. It's what children do, when they first start learning how to explore the world, be curious, engage with other kids. But parallel play is how that starts. So it may be that their degree of emotional, savvy and capacity to connect in that way harkens back to some lessons or mechanisms they learned and developed when they were at that phase of development, their inner child, so to speak. So while they may feel like they are connecting with you in the space, you may feel like there's kind of a veil or a wall up between you emotionally. And that can feel as if they're distancing themselves, or they're disinterested in connecting with you. And that can be confusing because they asked you to be there, right? The other thing that can happen is sometimes avoidant partners can demonstrate codependence tendencies as well. Right? People often think, oh, anxious people are codependent, but avoidant people are just as equally codependent. It just demonstrates itself in a different way. So attachment anxiety is a proximity issue. It's wanting someone to be at a certain distance or closeness to you emotionally, physically, mentally. And so sometimes even folks that have avoidant tendencies have attachment anxiety when you're not there. It doesn't mean that they're able to be fully emotionally present when you are there, but it does mean that you are providing some degree of safety and comfort while you are there. You're sort of like an anchor in the room, okay? Now, that's kind of attachment's important. We have it as human beings for a lot of important survival reasons. And it does support bonding. Our attachment anxiety encourages us to stick it out when we otherwise might run or bolt, right? But when it bleeds into a codependent dynamic is when we're not able to kind of see the forest from the trees, and we start confusing our attachment anxiety for love, compatibility, the desire for long-term commitment and relationship, right? So this is when you start sifting and sorting through the values and priorities. Do they actually line up? Now, if you're feeling like confused, there's too many mixed signals going on, and you're not really sure if he's just asking you over because he just doesn't want to be alone or because he actually likes being with you, then just ask, right? Bring it up in a non-judgmental way. So I noticed that you invited me over, but when I come over, you're watching TV, doing other projects, what have you, XYZ. And that kind of makes me feel like your focus is elsewhere. So can we talk about what your expectations are for when I come over, what you like about that, and also what I would like to feel when we're engaging, we're spending time together, right? And so you can kind of open up the dialogue with an air of objective observation and then curiosity, just sort of encouraging them to reflect on their behavior. You also want to consider, of course, in this situation, like, what are your own needs? Are you feeling unwanted and unfulfilled, and what contributes to that, right? So you're also kind of becoming increasingly clear and aware of what you like and what you don't like and how it's creating a feeling response within you. And then you get to ask yourself, what are the stories that I'm carrying around this feeling response? And so that allows you to kind of open up the dialogue so that you can have a mutually satisfying conversation, ideally, right? So long story short, just ask. Just ask. Be honest about how you feel when you're invited over. Be very specific and clear about what you are observing in a more objective way. Be curious, and then weigh it against your own values and priorities and what you want in relationship. And you can vocalize those, make them known, and depending on how they respond, you've got good information on the next steps in this relationship. Okay. Okay, let's see. Lucia, yes, I did receive your question. I have it here. Okay. So this question, can you help me practice recognizing and staying connected to my needs? When I am in an anxious state, it's like I can't feel or remember my needs, or as if I don't have them. Um, I was wondering if you have an exercise to help practice recognizing my needs and staying connected. Okay. So I have a boundaries guidebook that I like to use for this. And we'll include a link to that in the replay and caption of this video. These practices are in the Attachment 101 courses. So if you have the avoidant, disorganized, or secure, or anxious Attachment 101 courses, all of the courses have this exercise in it. The first thing is, what are my needs? Usually the first thing is to take a look at what you don't like, right? What's creating a negative feeling in your body? Because your body is going to reject what is not for you. Okay. So what don't I want? What don't I like? What don't I need? So, for example, I don't like it when a partner talks down to me. I don't like it when they insist that they know better than I do. I don't like it when a partner says they'll call and then they don't reach out. I don't like it when my partner dismisses my opinion or acts as if I'm some kind of burden. I don't like it when a partner says they're committed to me but then flirts with other people online, right? So let me know in the chat, actually. I'll ask that question. What are some things you don't like? You know you don't like in relationship, right? What are some things that you've learned you do not like? So pop them there in the chat. So we start there. Well, I don't like this. Okay, so the body feels a sense of threat. When you don't like something, the body contracts, closes up, pulls back, constricts, doesn't like it, right? So that it senses some sense of threat, okay? When they disconnect and only talk about themselves, when they avoid talking to me, being ignored, sure, yeah. So that means that you do like something there, right? So if you don't like something, that must mean you do like what is just basically the opposite of that. So for example, I don't like it when my partner talks down to me becomes I like it when a partner regards me as an equal. I don't like it when my partner insists that they know better than I do becomes I like it when a partner seeks out my guidance or advice on topics I know a lot about. So I don't like when they disconnect and only talk about themselves, means I like it when they connect by asking me questions about myself and there's an equal sharing of our experience. I don't like when my wife avoids talking to me, means I do like when my wife seeks me out and initiates intimate conversations. I don't like being ignored becomes I do like when someone acknowledges what it is that I'm saying, feeling, expressing, and then has a substantial response to that, right? Or contributes to the evolving conversation about it. Okay. Okay, so I know I don't like this, which means I do like that. And why do I like it? Why do I like it? So why I like it now points to the need, right? It points to the underlying need, value, priority that you have around that thing. So let's take it a step further. Well, I like it when a partner regards me as an equal. Why? Well, because I want to feel powerful and included, right? So the need usually connects to a feeling. I like it when my partner seeks out my guidance or advice on topics I know a lot about. Why? Because I want to feel competent and capable, right? I need to feel competent and capable. I need to feel powerful and included. Okay. I like when they connect to me by asking me questions and about myself and inviting me into a shared experience because I need to feel connected, acknowledged, seen, and respected, right? I like when my wife seeks me out to initiate conversations and have intimate discussions because I need to feel that they respect me. I need to feel wanted. I need to feel desired and like I have agency and can contribute to this relationship. I like it when someone acknowledges what I have to say and asks me to contribute to the conversation because I like to feel acknowledged. I like to feel included. I need a sense of belonging in this relationship, right? Um, okay. And then we add some specifics, right? So how do you know? How do you know when you are feeling this way? How do you know when you're feeling equal and included? How do you know that you're experiencing a sense of belongingness, right? And so if we translate that into communication, the best person that I have found to provide support with this is Marshall Rosenberg and his nonviolent communication, right? I recommend his book, Nonviolent Communication, A Language for Life by Marshall Rosenberg. He uses what is called positive action language. And this is when we are adding specifics to our communications so that we're not just throwing needs and wants out there without any kind of grounding. These specifics allow us to take action to affect a change in our emotional and energetic state, right? So we would ask ourselves, what words or actions help me to feel this way? What words or actions touch upon that feeling, that need that I have? So let's go back to our example. Well, I like it when a partner regards me as an equal, right? Because I need to feel included and like I'm an equal. So how do you know when you're being treated like an equal? What specific words or behaviors make you feel included? And when and where might you have felt equal and powerful in your life before and why? And so that's going to clue you into some of those specifics, right? So in the example that I have here, I'm going to use Sally and her partner John as an example. So Sally might say something like, well, I feel like an equal when John asks for my opinion on his work-related things. Also, when his tone of voice is direct and doesn't kind of beat around the bush trying to cushion something to protect my feelings. It also makes me feel included when he invites me out with his friends or wants to do shared activities together, when we make plans together, right? And it also makes me feel important to know that he enjoys spending time with me, that he trusts me with his private information, right? Takes me into his confidences. And when he wants to process his thoughts and feelings with me. I feel powerful, belonging, a sense of belonging, and I feel included, right? And these are all things that contribute to connection and intimacy. And then we just put it all together. So these are what I call ultimately our red and green flag statements, right? So first, the boundary statement is really what we don't like, right? So the boundary statement might be, well, I don't like it when my partner talks down to me because here's the need statement. I need to feel equal, included, and important, right? That's the feeling and the need go together. The feeling clues you into the need. I don't like it when my partner talks down to me. That's the boundary because I need to feel equal, included, and important. That's the deeper feeling need. Therefore, now here's how I'm going to take action on that. I'm not going to commit myself to anyone that makes me feel unequal, left out, or unimportant. I say commit, but I might even say give my time to, right? And so I'm going to honor this. I'm going to honor this in action by rejecting anyone who doesn't make me feel equal, included, or important. And because I went through all the work of identifying those specifics, I know that means when I meet someone who talks down to me, doesn't share their work life with me, doesn't invite me to hang out with their friends, is unwilling to make plans with me, keeps me in the dark about important things in their life, and or maybe takes someone else into their confidence above me or instead of me, right? And I know that I will invite someone into my emotional life and intimate spaces when I do feel included. And I know that I feel included and important when they speak to me directly and with a tone of voice that is clear, right? They don't pussyfoot around me when they do share their work experiences with me, when they do invite me to hang out with their friends, when they do make plans with me, when they do share important and intimate confidences with me above other people, right? So this is how we can identify the need, the boundary that it points to, the action now that we're going to take as a result of identifying the specifics of what creates that feeling, and the action, whether it is to say no to something or to invite something in. Because remember, boundaries are not walls, they are semi-permeable membranes, right? They are doors that we can open and shut. So our needs and our boundaries also include what we're willing to invite in, what we are willing to attract and receive, not just what we are rejecting or pushing out or protecting ourselves from. Okay. Now, if you're struggling to connect with the feeling, that's a body-based thing. So anytime you're struggling to connect to a feeling and you find yourself trying to figure it out up here, drop it into the heart. So imagine, just take your brain and drop it into the heart. And imagine that the brain kind of grows these roots or these branches, and just ask the heart brain, connect me to the energy in my body. Connect me to what I'm feeling in this moment. And remember, not all feelings are going to have a word attached to it, but they might have a color, a line, a shape, a form of some kind. They could have a sound. They could have a movement. So drop the brain into the heart, reach out. What's the energy in my body right now? Because feelings are just big energy moving through your body. And connect to the energy. If you don't have a word for it, ask the energy how it wants to move. Ask the energy what color it is. Ask the energy what shape, texture, line it has. And then maybe take those and put it in your body and move like that color, that line, that shape, that form. And in time, the words will come. And it may be more than one. And that's why it's hard to discern, right? But this is how we sift and sort through the nuances of the emotional energy moving through our body. And then we can use this 5-step process that we just went through to articulate the deeper emotional need and the boundaries that we are establishing around them, the actions we will take to honor them, and how we will recognize when we are inviting someone in or we are discerningly allowing them to just move on, right? So I hope that that was helpful. Great question, Lucia. Let's see. So those were our pre-submitted ones. Just going to take a pause and check our chat here. Let's see. I found out I have a healthy attachment style. Still, people have weird reactions to me when I am in public. Is there a way to make it less exhausting? Okay, so I would need more information. I don't really know what that means. People are weird? How do you mean weird? And why would it be exhausting? If you're assuming if you're exhausted because other people are doing something, that's really more an issue of energetic and emotional boundaries, right? That's theirs, it's not yours. So in my mind, there's really three different types of, I'm going to call it empathy. Really, it's energy exchange, but there's diffuse, there's fix it, and there's secure. So if you're taking on other people's energy and you're not really aware of it, like all of a sudden you have a big mood or a big feeling and you don't know where it came from, it's likely that it doesn't belong to you. Maybe there's like maybe 80% of that actually belongs to someone else. Maybe there's a 20% of it that's yours, but you're carrying more than is your due, right? And you're not aware of it. So that's diffuse empathy. Then we've got fix-it empathy. And this is when you do pick up on the energy and the emotions of other people around you, but you know it's coming from them. So you kind of go about trying to fix it, whatever it is, so that you can stop carrying their feelings because it's exhausting, right? And then the third type is secure empathy. So this is when you know where the energy is coming from. You can sense from whom it is being sourced. You are aware of what portion of that is yours that is coming up in response, right? Because we have mirror neurons in our brain, and when other people are having feelings, we sense them in our bodies. That's the core of empathy, right? But we also are aware of, well, this percentage of that is mine and that percentage of it is theirs. And so you're able to pull up some boundaries around that. And you have a process by which you can relinquish what is not yours and then learn from what came up for you for what is yours, right? So that's more of a, so secure empathy is boundaried empathy, more or less. So you may have a more secure way of thinking about and moving through the world, but if you're still feeling exhausted by other people's reactions, you got to work on your boundaries. Okay. Let's see. The anxious avoidance cycle triggered strongly with an avoidant friend. Admittedly, I did develop feelings and had reason to assume that she did too. The cycle broke down our friendship at the end because despite my own research, it turned out I could only endure her patterns until a certain point, but I know she doesn't understand what happened the way that I do. Now I'm worried she takes away the wrong lessons and it really sets her back. So my question, should I write a letter to her and explain carefully about attachment styles a bit and that the friendship didn't fail due to a lack of caring? Okay, so the friendship broke down in the end because despite my own research, it turned out I could only endure her patterns until a certain point. I'm going to reframe that for you. I had desires that outgrew the container of the relationship. It's not about her, about you enduring her. Her patterns broke it. You had a desire and you had a want that outgrew the container of that relationship, the sort of unspoken contract of that connection. And that may have been the whole point of that relationship for you, right? But I know she doesn't understand what happened in the way that I do. Okay, but you can't take away someone else's understanding, right? And she doesn't need to understand it in the way that you do. Okay. I'm worried she takes away the wrong lessons. So now you're dictating what are the right and wrong lessons for her. And she's set back on her path. So now you're judging her based on what you think would be forward or backward movement. Should I write a letter and basically correct her? Okay, so you have some work to do around your own inner critic and this concept of expectations and meeting them and failing them and whatnot. And she's kind of become a focal point for this at this time, I think, for you. In terms of sharing knowledge and understanding, just be aware that when you learn new information, there can also be a very critical and judgmental part of you that takes that knowledge and understanding and wraps itself around that and uses it as a filter through which you start to understand what is and is not progress in a relationship, what is and is not true for your partner and their reality, and what is and is not true for you and your reality, right? So I would say instead of trying to write an analysis and insist that this is what really happened, and if you don't think this way, then you got the wrong lessons, I would say, you know what? I've been on my own personal journey, and I've been doing some inner work, and I've been trying to take ownership of what really belongs to me. And one of the things that I have found truly helpful on my path is learning about attachment styles. And I'm not sure what you might be taking away from this. This is where I'm at, and this is what's true for me. That's all you can do. If you're interested in learning more about attachment styles, this really influenced the way that what I took away from our interactions. Here's a video, you should check it out. Or here's my three top most influential videos and blog posts and books I read that brought me to this conclusion. I think that they were light bulb moments for me. I think you'd get a lot out of it. And then you let them figure it out for themselves, right? Because you're taking on too much responsibility here. You're assuming way too much. Okay. All you can assume responsibility and accountability for is how you feel. And if your feelings grew out of the container of the relationship, you got to own that. You just wasn't a match. And that's okay. It's not about someone falling behind or doing the wrong thing or not catching up or not growing in the same way. It's just that you're on different paths, and you leaving in the way that you did could be the catalyst for this person to look at things in a more concerted way, right? So I hope that helps. Great questions, everyone. Okay. So I'm going to start to wrap it up now. The replay is going to remain inside the student dashboard. We'll be sure to post it, and I'll add those links that I had mentioned for continued exploration in the caption of the replay. And again, we pop in twice a month to do these live Q&As for all my students. So anyone who's purchased a course with me, you're eligible to participate. Inside the student dashboard under the live events module, you'll find all the replays that we've ever done so far, at least since we started this platform. And there's also a link to our schedule. So you can if you sign up for the Google Calendar, it will send you notifications a day before, an hour before, and 15 minutes before we go live every month. But usually it's on the first and third Thursday of each month, barring holiday rescheduling and things like that. So thank you to everyone who's joined. I so appreciate you being here. I so appreciate those of you that were able to come live as well. It's always nice to be in live space together. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Ebony, Lucia. So appreciate you. Katan, it's nice to see you, Katan. You're hanging in there. So I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week. And for those of you in the States, you enjoy the holiday next week. And we will be back for another call in December. Thank you, everyone.